Good morning, my fellow Americans. How are you today? Listen, I have really been thinking hard about what Joe Biden has been currently doing with all the pardons. I mean, some of these are such extremists that he pardoned. It's it's remarkable that they're allowing it because some of these people are real life monsters, and a lot of America has forgotten about it, and our children haven't seen it because it's not made any news. But so our children are walking around thinking these people deserve pardons. No, they don't. Some of them have been, let's just say, less than perfect inmates, have accumulated more to their criminal record while in prison. Okay? So some of these pardons are very questionable. But what I'm going to throw at you, nobody's talking about. And I want to know why. It's one of the most important questions for Joe Biden's legacy. And my question is, who has been our president for the last 3-4 years? If Joe was already being treated for dementia, back when he was running against Trump, and he used COVID to hide the illness because he was not in front of the public, where Trump was still out going to rallies, doing his thing. Joe didn't. He did his speeches from home. They used a lot of generated stuff to make it look like he was in the White House and to make it look like he was doing his job, doing what he was supposed to be doing to campaign for president. So, and at that time, I don't think the dementia was really impacting him hard. And now, let me tell you why I have come to the conclusions I'm about to tell you about. I took care of my mother, who was forming early dementia when she had a stroke. And her doctors were aware of this and put me on notice that if her cognitive abilities should diminish, I immediately, as her power of attorney, need to start filing forms to get me into place to sign any documentation that was a legal contract, medical care, her personal home care, her treatments, all of that. That was a bird. I put bird seed on my porch banister because the birds come around. He flew into the window there.
A little far away from you.
But I had to handle everything from her accounts, her electric, her everything. It became my responsibility when I accepted her dying wish that if she had lost her cognitive abilities, someone would have good control of it. And I hope I did right by her. I tried very, very hard. For someone who knew nothing about handling a trust, I did the best I could. I was not very versed with legal terminology. Let's just say hours with my mother's attorneys that helped set up this trust to protect my mother in her less well part of her life before she left this world. Now, one of the things that was brought up by the doctor when they gave my mother her diagnosis, yes, it is confirmed she has dementia. Now, my mother still had probably 80% of her cognitive abilities, but they said it's a fast-moving degenerative disease that without certain treatments, it was definitely going to take my mother out quickly because she had other complications. She had congestive heart failure, she was suffering from kidney failure, and other things. Things that happen as you age, and your body says it's time to shut down, and you got to go get a new one. So, well, that's my point of view on it. Anyway, immediately upon that diagnosis, my mother was dissolved of all responsibility. She would not ever be able to say anything on her life because I had the power of attorney. Now, if Joe was being monitored for dementia during the campaign time, that's not a diagnosis. I think they withheld the diagnosis because they had one after the first year. Because after the first year Joe Biden took office was when we started to see the debilitation beginning to impact his speech, his thought processes, and his ability to stabilize his own walking. I mean, my mother had to use a walker, and still I had to be right there because all of a sudden her muscles would quit working. That is part of dementia. It's your brain is not sending the signals. Okay? So Joe had to receive that diagnosis after that first year in office, or somewhere during that first year in office. And upon doing so, he had to sign over all of his legal rights, all of them, to a trustee or a power of attorney and a trustee, because you can do both, or you can give one person all that responsibility. Now, my parents were not super wealthy. They had managed to survive incredible economic devastation and come out with a little something. And I was amazed because I was in my mid-50s and I still had never owned a home. Never even looked at it as a given that I could have one. I considered myself a doomed renter for life. That means somebody else will always have say-so over what I can do in my home, or how my home can look, or, no, thank you. Back to Joe. Listen, once the diagnosis is confirmed, usually through blood tests and other tests, once that is confirmed, he should never have been allowed to continue as our president. He then became what we would call a sitting president. He really didn't interact with people much, and he didn't, because he made a fool of himself every time he did. The dementia was so obvious for the next 3 years that I'm surprised. The only reason I think he's lived this long is because he's had way better medical care than my mother had. And my mother had some good medical and dental and optical. She had the full package. She paid for it her whole life. And then by the time she was able to access it, there was a lot of hooplas you had to run through and restrictions. So, yeah, that's a whole nother video. What I want to know is who got the power of attorney? Who is signing into laws, and who is doing pardons, and who has told a contractor to take our wall and sell it off? I'm stunned. I'm sorry. This is unbelievable. Who is instigating a war with the Palestinians and Israel and us? Who is instigating the war in Ukraine and Russia? I want to know who that person is, because that is the person who not only did all that I've mentioned, but allowed pedophiles and, creepoids in women's bathrooms, women's sports. Look, I don't care what your gender is. It's not your identity. Your gender is a tool you use for pleasure and reproduction. It is not your identity. Get over yourselves. And that means Joe didn't actually cause any of that. He didn't allow any of that. He went along with it when he was in the public because they told him and even gave him cards to read, but he couldn't even do it because the dementia was so bad. So for 3 years, absolutely, who's been running my country? Has it been my vice president, Kamala Harris, who decided that federal laws should not be upheld, that citizens should be squashed and removed from our own rights and excluded from human rights? Who? Who did this? I want a name. And until Trump is standing at a podium telling me that he is aware of and knows who has been actual president of my country that I did not vote for, they did is an invasion of my government by probably outside and possibly foreign groups. I want to know who's been out here signing documents in Joe's name when they knew it was illegal. Unless my mother could prove that she was recovering from the dementia. And then she would have to take me to court to achieve getting all her rights to all the legal stuff, all of her bills, all of that back. Although if she were able to recover, I would definitely have given it all back to her gladly. Her life was very heavy and hard to balance in the way that she did. I had no clue what I was doing. But whoever's our president and has been for 3 years does know what they are doing. And they're doing it intentionally. And if these drones or this fall or any of the other hype has anything to do with whoever's been running my country for the last 3 years, you deserve, because that goes beyond treason. That goes beyond being a traitor. That is intentional sabotage of a country. I tell you right now, I shouldn't have to. Because anybody who thinks that a person who would do that to our entire country, immigrants and all, probably should be put in that boat with them. Harsh penalty for harsh genocide. That's what's been committed. And I'm tired of it. And it's ongoing. And you think I don't see the numbers because they're not reporting how many people are dying right now? I typed in on Google how many people have died, and I gave it a date. I think it was the 6th of this year, or last year. And it was, on that day, a couple 100,000 people around the world had died of 2023. When I go back and I asked about December of 2023, I couldn't, there's no data. It has not been calculated yet. Okay, I get that. I wonder why. Because I could ask you about specific days, even like the day in November, ask how many people died today around the world. Normal numbers, normal numbers. All of a sudden there's nothing. Why? When you ask a question generally, for an open, what they call statistic, meaning you take the whole globe in and just how many people have died. Not why they've died, just died. You can usually actually get an answer. I can't anymore. Why? I don't know what's going on with that. But then again, I see a lot of hinky stuff happening on the internet and with signals, and that's why I'm redoing this video, is because I want to know who's been running my country, and I want to make sure they don't get a hold of my next president. Now, I suspect that Nancy, and I have no proof of this at all, I can just tell you, before Joe was told he couldn't run for office again by Pelosi, they were great buddies. And now they're in a war of some kind, I guess. I don't buy it. Same old hype. They pay, go back and forth. You know, it's like watching a bunch of hens attacking each other. It's, yeah. or watching The View, however you want to. Sorry. Sorry. But yes, this video will probably get redone a couple times because I want it to come out right. And in my live, it did come out right, what I wanted to say. Because it's important that we ask these questions. We've been deceived for 3 years minimum. Deceived as to who our president really is. And it's not Joe Biden. And apparently, it's not Kamala Harris because she's still claiming VP and hiding under the rug because of a disastrous campaign. So, we've all been aware for the last couple of years, especially when the campaign hit home and we were looking at possibly Joe for another term until that was changed up. And hey, Trump, kudos, because I got to tell you, you went through that transition, even knowing she was not really running for president, because a candidate for president has to be elected through their party for their ability to run for office. And so she wasn't legally running. I'm telling you, these campaigns are ridiculous. How much laws they actually break. Or over probably the last 2 or 3 decades, gone over and altered. Amended, as they like to call it. We made an amendment. Yeah, what'd you destroy this time? That's my question when I hear all that. But who's been running my country is important to me. I want a name. I want a name. And then I want them held accountable. That would be real justice. I want to know who has been the real pen behind Joe Biden. Answer that question, and you'll get right to the top of who's running the show globally. And then you can shut it down. They're hoping we'll go into a civil war, but I'm not down with that. I don't think most Americans aren't down with that. Now, the angry children, of course, they're always down for war games, war this, but the first time they're bleeding, they're out. They don't want, yeah. And sadly, I hate to say this, but they're spoiled, all of them. Even my own grandkids are somewhat spoiled. I would not call them, like I see on TikTok and YouTube or Instagram or X, kind of spoiled brats. But I was poor. So they got the benefit of that, keeping them from feeling so entitled. They understood they had to work for everything. And my grandkids are learning that too, even the youngest. And, so the tradition is being carried on, that you have to work your own way. But because of Joe Biden, policies and law changes and amendments, we've seen our government totally throw out every law we worked hard to get for protection. Literally. Some states just vacated the Constitution altogether and made up their own rules and actually are still doing it. Need I say California, New York? Yeah. Foreigners get all the rights. We don't. Even though we worked for it. They wouldn't be where they are if we hadn't worked for it. And now they want to take everything we've earned and give it to somebody else. I want to take everything they think and they have convinced themselves that they've earned and show them they haven't. They've misused the authority they were given. They caused mass distrust, and it was intentional. So, I want to know who the saboteur is. It can't be Joe. He doesn't know what he's doing. Now, my mother, when she was getting worse with her dementia, it was, I could give her instructions, and if she was sitting, she could follow those instructions clearly with no problem. But I had to do them. Okay, Mom, I need you to lift your foot. I couldn't give her another command because she would get confused. And I'd put on her shoe or a sock in her shoe, and then I'd put her foot down. Mom, I need your foot. And she would raise usually the same foot. So I would tell her, no, this one. Can you lift it for me? And I'd reach over. Now, Joe is going to get that far. I'm surprised he isn't. But he, like I said, he's had care of my mother. Could have only dreamed of. But I'm glad her suffering is over, but it was painful to see. And we have an incompetent president sitting, but he is not the president. He is not the acting president. I can tell you that right now. And that needs to end. We need to make sure no president ever is just a sitting president. American Granny out.